It is the professional examiner's responsibility, ladies and gentlemen, to ensure an examinee does absolutely well on their exam. An examiner's responsibility is to ensure a truthful person passes the exam. And they don't do anything inappropriate. What that means is if you are absolutely telling the truth and being open and honest, that professional examiner, like myself, is to ensure you understand every question that was asked, that you are calmer than you were when you first came to the office. You have nothing else that you've not told the examiner, you're not holding back anything, and you feel calm enough and ready to take the examination. Welcome to Inside the Polygraph. I'm your host, David Goldberg, expert polygraph examiner. Join me as I and my guests break down the facts, fictions of polygraph testing, law enforcement, and so much more. Real cases, real conversations. The truth is always revealed inside the polygraph. Welcome to Inside the Polygraph with David Goldberg. I'm your host, David Goldberg. On today's episode, we're going to be answering a very huge question that I often get called about and asked both on email, phone calls, and from this podcast. Why do people fail when they're telling the truth? That is a huge question, and I'm going to try to explain it on today's episode. Ladies and gentlemen, why do people fail when they know they're telling the truth? First, I don't have to explain why people fail when they're lying, do I? No, because if you're lying or you're holding back information, you're absolutely going to fail that exam. However, if you go to an examiner and you know you're absolutely telling the truth and you get told you have failed, basically you're being told you are a liar. What does that do to you? That ultimately devastates you. It just drops you to the floor and ultimately can ruin a lot, right? It can destroy your dream job. It can take your integrity away. It can take custody away from you. It can ruin a relationship. It can ultimately have you charged. It can do a lot of damage to you ultimately when you are told you have failed this examination, when ultimately you know you've been telling the truth. So we're going to deal with this today, and I'm going to tell you why this tends to occur. It starts with the examiner. Ladies and gentlemen, how does one find an examiner? Well, a lot of times someone gets online and types in closest examiner to me, nearest polygraph examiner near me, or lie detector near me. And then there's a list of examiners that might come up in your area. Sometimes people will call the very first or the first examiner that answers the phone. When that phone is answered, what's the first question that is usually asked? Are you available today? And the next question is, which really is sad, but it's always, how much do you charge? When the examiner says usually, yep, I'm available today, or I can take you tomorrow, and then tells you the fee, and the fee can range anywhere from, let's say, $150 all the way up to, minimum $350 and maybe even higher. Sometimes people will say, oh yeah, that's a great price, I'll do it. And then they book it, and then they go to the examination site. However, ladies and gentlemen, no other questions are asked because all the individual cares for is getting into that polygraph office and getting those testing issues resolved, which is sad because the questions that should be asked when you're searching for an examiner that's going to deal with life-altering issues is, how long you've been doing this? Are you a licensed examiner? Are you court certified? What are your references? Who uses you, such as Child Protective Services? How many attorneys have ever used you? Do therapists use you? How many cases or examinations have you ever administered? These are some serious questions that I personally, even if I'm not an examiner, that I would be asking someone if they're going to test me for life-altering decisions that can ultimately change my life or ruin my life. I'm not going to just say, oh, great, you can do me today for $150. Let me come busting into your door and let me have you test me. No way, no how. I would ask a bunch of questions. And this is what happens, ladies and gentlemen, when someone who is absolutely believing in themselves that they're going to pass and they haven't done anything and they go to a wrong examiner. It is the examiner who is ultimately responsible for ensuring you do well on that polygraph test. So let's continue and go even further. Let's hypothetically say you don't even search online and say nearest polygraph examiner near me or lie detector near me, but you go online and you search on the websites and you find an examiner and you look at their website and you go, wow, this examiner seems to have everything in there. Ladies and gentlemen, let me explain something to you about websites. Anyone and everyone can build a website nowadays. And there are some excellent professional websites built out there. However, please be cautious as to what is on those websites and what's not on those websites. Some examiners put a lot, such as myself. I put all my credentials, I put everything on there, my education in reference to what I've done and polygraphs, because I don't have anything to hide to my clients that call me. However, there are a lot of examiners out there that don't even put their name on the website. And I will tell you this, ladies and gentlemen, firsthand knowledge, that I've had an examiner cut and paste my bio and a lot of things that I did and put on their own website. So you have to be very cautious as to what you read on their websites. And when you read it, don't always take it for face value. When you call, question them even further. Because when I found out that that examiner had done what they did, I called one of the largest associations that's out there, hoping that they would protect me. And they didn't, because they said they don't get involved in private matters of examiners and that's not their job as an association. Their job is only for education purposes, and that's it. So, ladies and gentlemen, they don't really do things like that, the associations. So basically, they're just out there for educational purposes for examiners. They can't enforce rules or laws. So when you see an examiner's website, absolutely go through it with a fine-tooth comb, but also ask questions. And here's what you're not going to find on websites. You're not going to find any examiner putting on there the bad things that they've done, such as they've had lawsuits, they've committed inappropriate things with examinees, they've been sued for racial discrimination, they've lost contracts, they have facilitated criminal acts, or they've had other people lose custody or jobs for false rendered results. But you can go online once you find those examiners' name and search, and you'll see those things about that examiner is online. So do your due diligence is what I say prior to going to any examiner. There are many, many excellent examiners out there. You just have to do your due diligence. When you do find an examiner and you do believe in this examiner, here is why people that often are believing that they're going to do really well because they haven't done whatever they're being accused of fail, is because the examiner can be someone that is either lackadaisical, inexperienced, or really just doesn't really care much about the job they're doing, which means that they've been in the job maybe for so long, it's just like Groundhog Day. Wake up, go do the job, get out of the office, wake up, do the job, and they're not really empathetic for your particular issue. They're just there, collect the money, get you out of the door, and then it's like next, and that's what they're mainly concerned about. And so that examiner may not formulate the questions accordingly and properly. And then when they test you, ladies and gentlemen, those questions may not be proper enough, and that's where you may also fail your exam based on inappropriate or improper question formulation. So make sure when you're in that office with that examiner and they go over those questions with you, that those questions are absolutely defining what you need to resolve on your exam. If it is, then I would say you shouldn't have an issue with doing well. Have you been accused of one of the following in your life, such as infidelity, custody matters, CPS investigations, or serious criminal matters that you're currently being investigated for? At Executive Protection Group Polygraph Service, we have been helping thousands of individuals for over 24 years, no matter who you are or what you have been accused of, with the highest accuracy, integrity, and overall compassion to everyone's needs. We are not your typical polygraph or lie detection service. At Executive Protection Group Polygraph Service, we are certified experts recognized in courts throughout the country, and we stand by our promise to give you full closure and all your needed answers. Call at 757-495-1301 and visit our website at www.executiveprotectiongrp.com to get started. I've said this in the past, and I'll continue to say it. People do not fail polygraph examinations with expert professional examiners like myself for nervousness, anxiety, or any medical conditions that you may be going through. Inexperienced examiners may not be able to determine the differences between anxiety and your responses to those questions. But an experienced examiner would never, ever, ever fail you for anxiety or any kind of medical conditions you might be going through. So don't let that scare you or get you more anxious when you go to take a polygraph test. It is the professional examiner's responsibility, ladies and gentlemen, to ensure an examinee does absolutely well on their exam. An examiner's responsibility is to ensure a truthful person passes the exam. And they don't do anything inappropriate. What that means is if you are absolutely telling the truth and being open and honest, that professional examiner, like myself, is to ensure you understand every question that was asked, that you are calmer than you were when you first came to the office. You have nothing else that you've not told the examiner. You're not holding back anything, and you feel calm enough and ready to take the examination, and you understood the questions that will be asked of you on your exam, and you should do absolutely perfect when you are tested. And if you're telling the truth, you have nothing to fear and you'll do well. That's what a professional examiner is supposed to do. Explain things very concise and clearly so you have nothing to worry about when it's time to be tested. An inexperienced examiner or examiner that doesn't care is not going to go through those steps very intense and in depth enough to make you feel very comfortable. Because I've had many clients come to me after I go through my process and say, wow, I've taken a test before or many tests before, and that examiner didn't do what I've done. So it is up to the examiner, ladies and gentlemen, to ensure you do well, especially when you are going there for a very important issue, which is always an important issue when you're taking a polygraph test. How is it supposed to work? I'm going to tell you, ladies and gentlemen, when you go there, the examiner is supposed to get some basic information from you, explain obviously why you're there, go through the questions that will be asked of you, and then after that, make sure you understand, test you, and by then, you shouldn't be as nervous as you were when you first got there, because there should be no surprises whatsoever. However, ladies and gentlemen, there are examiners that want you in and out because they have other clients that they've booked, or they just don't want to be bothered and hassled with you taking their time. So it's in and out. And so that's not proper. And that's where a lot of people get really, really more anxious and more anxiety ridden. And that's how people do tend to fail their tests, also based on question formulation. If it's not properly formulated, you could ultimately fail your exam. Another issue that can be in reference to failing a polygraph test is if you don't ask questions, or if your questions that you ask, they're shut down immediately. An examiner should not fear you questioning them, as long as it's not derogatory or you're not going on the attack. You should have every right to ask questions like, well, can you explain further? Or I don't understand, or what's the next process, or whatever. Because that examiner should be able to explain everything to you properly so that you feel so comfortable. And so, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to say this, and I'll say it again. The reason why truthful people tend to fail, it's based on inappropriate question formulation, inexperienced or lackadaisical examiners, or lazy examiners, or examiners that don't care. And that's where it all comes from. Not because you, okay? A liar is the one that fails. A person that deceives or holds back information fails. But a truthful person should have nothing to fear about an exam if you're telling the absolute complete truth and the examiner is treating you fairly and is doing everything that they're supposed to do. In closing, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to say this, and I really want you to really hear this loudly and clearly. I want you to do your very due diligence when it comes to searching and researching a polygraph examiner, because we are all not made the same. We all go to the same schooling that's accredited, but after we graduate, we're not all the same. Some are licensed, some continue with education, some don't, and some really believe in helping others. Some just do it because either it's a hobby to them, some do it part-time, some do it because they want to help people, and some just do it just because they thought it would be a nice career change. So really do your due diligence, do research on the examiner you're seeking out to help you, because ultimately it could be your dream job, your career, your life, your children, your relationship, and ultimately your freedom. And in closing, ladies and gentlemen, I just want to say this. If you know you're telling the truth, stick to being who you are and be open and honest. You have nothing to fear, and you know who you are. You know you're an honest person, and don't change. You know who I am. If you need my help, reach out to me. If you like more of this, like, subscribe, and comment. And again, be true to yourself, and thank you. And I look forward to helping anyone that needs my help. Have a great day. Thanks so much for listening. If you truly liked what you heard today, please be sure to rate the show, share with others, and subscribe for more episodes.